The Gloriana Set by ThebeMoon. Read by Ella Max Mabella. Chapter 31. Shifting Sands. I solemnly swear I'm up to no good, Hermione said, tapping the Marauder's map with her wand. She stood in the middle of her bedroom, a black robe slung over her desk chair, that damned Gloriana Set sitting on her bed. It was a free afternoon, since there was no defense against the dark arts on Mondays, and the perfect time to talk to Malfoy. For Hermione's mind was made up. She would return the diamonds to him personally. Malfoy's dot was in Stockholm's office, where he was likely marking potion assignments so the professor could dance off to some ministry reception or ribbon cutting. Honestly, it seemed like the Slytherin had just taught potions in his spare time. Hermione pushed the flat velvet box into her beaded bag, which she stuck into her uniform skirt pocket. Her wand and the map she tucked into her other pocket. She took a moment to straighten her jumper and tried to smooth her hair before heading down to the 6th floor. She didn't fear running into Theo. He was at a charm study group this afternoon. He and Malfoy had spent all day Sunday together serving detention in Bluebell's meadow. Theo had arrived at the library afterwards, tight-lipped and a little shaken, refusing to provide details. He had recovered well enough by Monday, but Malfoy was colder and more distant to everyone than before. Hermione ducked into a dark alcove just past the trophy room, lightening the map with her wand. Malfoy was still there and still alone. He must be pretty thick with Slughorn these days to gain access to the professor's precious office. Her pounding heart sounded loud in the tiny space. "Don't be a coward," she told herself. "Just give him the diamonds, thank him, and go. He might not be engaged to Astoria, but purity will always conquer." Hermione refused to be a part of Malfoy's little rebellion against his family. He would just have to put the Gloriana Set away for his grandson, or Godric willing, great-grandson. And she realized she was clutching her magical purse to her chest, the pink beaded bag feeling suddenly heavy. "You can't keep them," she told herself silently, hating the tears pushing behind her eyes. "You're being greedy and selfish." Maybe she should talk to Ginny, but no. She knew what Ginny would say. She'd hear family diamonds and go spare. She'd have Hermione and Malfoy practically married in no time. Hermione snorted at the very idea. Sure, and then they'd go live with Narcissa in Malfoy Manor, and Hermione would sit in the drawing room where she was fucking tortured and knit scarves for Lucius while Draco went around removing all the state's muggle-killing traps and curses so her parents could visit. "You can't have them, you idiot. You can't have him." She took a deep breath. "You can do this," and left the alcove, only for a young Slytherin boy, scroll in hand, to reach the office door first.
"Excuse me,"
he said to the portrait hanging beside it.
"I need to—"
"Nasty little slug!"
shrieked an old woman's voice.
"Trying to sneak in with an overdue essay. Slug, I should chop you up. Yes, you would make a tasty addition to a liquid death potion, sliced fine with a pinch of salt."
The boy squeaked and fled in terror, and Hermione quailed slightly. Slughorn's portrait, she knew, was the famously ill-named potion master's Galatea Merrythought. She thought of just waiting in the corridor for Malfoy to leave, but that seemed unworthy of a Gryffindor. Hermione strode up to the door.
"Attention!"
Merrythought rapped out.
"Oh, there's one split open, a chest perfect carapace."
"Lead it to a venomous tentacula," Hermione answered promptly. "It will eat the chisparfle and spit out the carapace." Merrythought opened the office door with a snarl. Hermione entered, grateful that she'd made some kind of list. Slughorn's office looked much more impressive when it wasn't packed with people, as it had been during his silly Christmas party in Hermione's 6th year. The large room was rich and opulent, all heavy brocade and dark polished wood. A single petal floated in a large glass bowl of water, and Hermione watched as the petal sank and turned into a silver fish. 2 sofas flanked a stone fireplace, covered by an elaborate brass screen. Malfoy was stretched out on one of the sofas, in his socks, looking perfectly at home, his tie loosened, a stack of essays on the floor beside him. He held a piece of parchment with a broken seal in one hand and a drink in the other. "What is it, Granger?" he asked, looking displeased to be interrupted. "We need to talk." "No, we really don't," he said, eyes back on his letter. Hermione sat down on the sofa opposite him anyway, prepared to wait him out. She had planned to throw a giant fit, had been looking forward to it actually, but Malfoy's face was lined with worry despite his relaxed posture. She cast about for something else to look at. On a table behind Malfoy's sofa sat a large hourglass, its brass handles shaped like snakes, with green sand streaming swiftly into the lower bell. Hermione was intrigued. She'd read somewhere that the sand ran according to the quality of the conversation. If stimulating, the sand fell slowly, and vice versa. "How did you know I was here?" Malfoy asked, still frowning at the parchment. "That's a secret." "Having me followed, Granger?" "No, nothing like that." Malfoy tossed the letter aside and plucked a scroll from the pile. "I have work to do." He set down his drink and dipped his quill into a red inkpot floating beside him. Hermione just waited, listening to the snapping fire and the scratching of Malfoy's quill. A brass-bound clock ticked softly. He watched him rapidly mark essays without spilling a drop of ink as the hourglass sand spurted downward. The fish in the glass bowl turned back into a petal and floated back to the water's surface. She felt like she was back in the Gryffindor common room at the end of that fateful party, except this time she was the one watching Malfoy. And she had the agenda. Perhaps she should pour her own drink. Slughorn's liquor was likely top-notch, and so the eyes saying, "I don't like this pattern, Malfoy. You doing and saying all these weird things that make me think you—" Hermione shook her head. Focus. Time was passing, and Malfoy looked determined to ignore her all night. She cleared her throat. "I had tea with your mother on Sunday," she said. That did it. Malfoy looked up, eyes wide, a red ink blot spreading like blood on the essay on his lap. "I see." He cast aside the ruined essay and sat up a little higher on the sofa's large satin pillows. "That would explain this letter I just received." The scroll with the broken seal floated off the sofa and over to her. Hermione used a bit of wandless magic to flatten the parchment. She scanned the first few words, then looked over at him. "Malfoy, I shouldn't be reading this." "Read it," he commanded. His tone earned him a sharp look, but she complied. There was no salutation. The note read, "I am dictating this missive to your mother, since my current residence does not allow ours. Be aware that I am sacrificing precious time with my wife to communicate with you instead. However, the intelligence she brings demands immediate action. When I entered this place, never to return to my ancestral home, my only comfort was that I was in possession of an heir prepared to take on the mantle of the Malfoy legacy. But as word of your recent activities reaches my ears, I wonder if perhaps the Dementor's kiss would not have been a kind of fate than being forced to watch as my only son disgraces the name he has the honor to bear. I speak of your abandonment of the most advantageous alliance and the surrender of family treasures cherished for generations into ignorant, ungrateful, and undeserving hands. I demand the immediate return of our property by any means necessary to Malfoy Manor. I look forward to your reply confirming that it has been accomplished. Only then will you again have the right to call me Father." Hermione read the letter swiftly, but pretended to need more time to calm her breathing and consider the implications. She should have expected this. Hermione knew that Narcissa was visiting her husband the following day, but this cold, poisonous letter convinced Hermione that even after years of fighting Death Eaters, she understood nothing of Lucius Malfoy. He gave a tiny sigh, rolling up the scroll with a flick of her finger. Then she looked over at the recipient of these words. "Well, he's a fine one to talk of disgracing the name of Malfoy," she said. "You think this is funny, Granger?" he asked, dropping his black stocking feet on the carpet and leaning forward. His face, hair, and white uniform shirt shone golden in the light of Slughorn's lamps. "I find it anything but funny." Hermione said calmly, floating the letter back to him. "How dare he defy your authority?" "Yes, exact. Defy my what?" She huffed in exacerbation. "You know, I try to be perfectly clear, but people, they just don't want to listen." "What are you talking about?" Hermione stood and looked down at him, hands on hips. "I explained all this to your mother very carefully yesterday. I said, your son is not the heir. He is now head of the family. He owns the Malfoy treasures. They are his to do with as he pleases, to give them to whoever he pleases." Malfoy stared up at her like he'd never seen her before. "You explained this to my mother?" "I didn't care for her tone." Hermione sniffed. Malfoy's jaw dropped. "And by extension," she continued, "although I did not admittedly spell this out, you are fully within your rights to enter in or out of any betrothal agreement unilaterally." A curl fell into her eyes, and she impatiently pushed it back. "I was there when Lucius was sentenced. I clearly remember the law as it was read, and your father is in no position to demand anything." She scowled. "Neither is your mother." Malfoy's eyes narrowed, and she stepped back as he also stood facing her, rising up and up. Godric, he was tall. The sand in the hourglass behind him, Hermione noticed, had slowed to a trickle. "What did Mother say to you?" he asked tensely. Hermione tilted her head up at him. "She demanded that I return the diamonds, of course, and she's unhappy that you took the codex and probably the runestone from the manor. Anyways, she was willing to forgive my ignorant acceptance of the diamonds as long as I gave them back to her that very day." He winced at the word ignorant. "Obviously you didn't return them," he said. "No, I didn't," she answered softly, holding his gaze. "I told her Draco wouldn't like it." "You were right." Malfoy's voice was husky. "I wouldn't like it at all." He stepped closer. "You called me Draco." "Oh, yes," she grinned. "It drove your mother wild." Malfoy smirked. "No wonder my parents went mental. Serves them right for questioning my judgment." "Oh, they should certainly question your judgment," Hermione said. "Your judgment is horrid." He blinked, startled. "You gave me the Gloriana set," Hermione cried. "What in the name of all that is unholy were you thinking? A priceless heirloom, and you just toss it through my window. What did you expect to happen?" "Well, I didn't expect you to get it on the Prophet's front page with Theo," Malfoy snapped. "I could have done without that." Hermione sighed and fell on the sofa again. "I know, I'm sorry, Malfoy. I apologized to your mother too. It was stupid of me, but Lavender... She gritted her teeth. "Theo recognized it as a significant piece of jewellery and wondered about it, and then Fleur." "Who?" "Remember the Triwizard champion from Beaubaton, 4th year?" "Most definitely," Malfoy said, eyes glinting. "The Vila?" "Yes," Hermione said rather grumpily. "Anyway, Theo and I met her and Bill Weasley at dinner. She recognized the diamond pin as goblin-made, and that made me suspicious. So I went yesterday morning to Borgin and Burke's." The shop name drew Malfoy out of his trance. "What? You went to Borgin and Burke's? It wasn't the first time. You've been there before." Hermione looked down. "The 6th year," she said in a small voice. "Why were you there?" he asked. She didn't answer. "Hermione?" He joined her on the sofa, frowning into her face. "Why were you there in 6th year?" "I followed you." Malfoy's frown deepened. "You followed me there?" She shrugged. "After you left, I went inside to find out what you were doing. I'll admit subtlety is not my strong suit. Borgin kicked me out right quick, but—" "Talk about horrid judgment. He could have heard you. If I'd seen you following me, I could have heard you." Hermione scoffed. "Like I was afraid of you. Sweet mother of... And then you went back yesterday. How could you?" "I knew what I was doing," Hermione said. "I'm not a 16-year-old girl anymore. War heroine, remember? Fully grown witch. You forced my hand, giving me such a significant set of jewellery." "You weren't supposed to know," Malfoy muttered, glancing away. "Hello, have we met, Hermione Granger? Of course I started getting suspicious with my car suddenly tamed and friends getting all cut up. Sorry, I didn't realize that half the men in 8th year would be petting your hair." Malfoy glared at her. "So then you just danced into Borgin and Burke's and slapped the Gloriana set down on the counter? You're lucky Borgin didn't hex you and steal the jewels." Hermione scoffed again. "No, I look like an idiot." I watered the room and kept my hand on my wand the whole time. Morgan couldn't take them anyway, because the bloody jewels are bound to us, which means only I can wear them and only you can touch them. She looked at him levelly, trying to ignore his closeness on the sofa. But you knew that. As like on party, you prompted me to thank you, then you touched the pin. You knew Malfoy men give out this jewellery as bloody interest gift. Again, what were you thinking? Morgan's going to spread this all over, Malfoy grumbled. Nonsense, I obliviated him, of course. Malfoy looked at her sternly, reminding her of Theo. Slytherin men were so bossy. You are not to go back to that shop, Hermione. I will go back any time I want, Hermione cried, jumping to her feet. I am not your betrothed, or your prior betrothed, or interest payment, or any other fool pure-blooded pre-marriage classification. I don't care how many spell-addled hair accessories you throw my way. I will go where I want, when I want, and how I want. All right, Malfoy yelled back. Calm down. He took a deep breath, his hand on his knees. Just allow me to come with you when you go to Nocturne Alley again. Of course I will, she said. The apothecary branch has some potion ingredients it would be very hard to get anywhere else. Malfoy stared up at her, not knowing what to do with this sudden capitulation. Then he leaned back on the sofa and shook his head, chuckling. What's so funny? Hermione demanded. You, he said, stretching an arm along the sofa back. Facing off Mother? She demands the jewels, and not only do you not obey, but you instruct her. He tilted his head slightly, a silent invitation to join him, and Hermione found herself complying without thought, twisting on the sofa cushions to face him. The sand in the hourglass was practically dropping one grain at a time. Malfoy was looking at her with hooded eyes, the firelight playing across his face. You defended me, Hermione, he said quietly. After everything that's happened, you still defended me. And you defended my gift. You should have jumped at a chance to get rid of Malfoy jewellery. Instead, you protected it. I will always defend your right to be an idiot, Hermione said. Even when you trick your mother into delivering family jewellery by implying it's for another witch, thereby prompting said witch to brag about your betrothal and all your little sex games. Malfoy's eyes widened in surprise, and Hermione flushed. Merlin, she had a big mouth. She turned to face forward, hands clasped on her lap. I know I'm not what you and Theo are used to, she said. I'm not as experienced. Her face was hot. She felt like Ginny telling Harry she'd shagged Blaise. At that moment, Hermione felt incredibly grateful that Ernie had interrupted her with Theo in that storage room. Maybe she should help him salvage that travesty of a Halloween fest. Look at me, Hermione, Malfoy commanded. Again she complied without thought. His eyes were unusually gentle. You are enough for any wizard, he said. His mouth quirked slightly. Too much for most, I'd say. They were very close now, and she could feel the warmth of his arm against her shoulder. The faint scent of his cologne beckoned her. The ticking of the clock seemed very loud. Hermione blinked a few times, then looked away and pulled a beaded bag out of her pocket. Do it now. Here, she said, tugging out the velvet box holding the Gloriana set. I couldn't care less what your parents think, but this still belongs. No. Malfoy leaped off the sofa and backed away, as if to put distance between himself and the jewels. I gave you the Gloriana set. It is yours. Hermione stood as well, holding out the box to him. This set is a family heirloom. Malfoy rolled his eyes. Is it now? I had no idea. Draco, you have to take it back. Hermione was feeling a little panicked. She was trying to do the right thing here. She rushed forward, trying to shove the box into his hand, but Malfoy dodged her with seeker reflexes, grinning. Is this the best you can do? He asked, circling Slughorn's desk. Take it back, she repeated. She backed him up against the carved stone pillar and slapped the box against his chest repeatedly. Merlin, you're violent, Malfoy said, grinning. Is that how you treat a priceless heirloom? What would Mother say? She felt warm fingers brush back her curls. You might as well keep the diamonds, he said in her ear. It's not like anyone else can wear them. Hermione stilled, holding the velvet box against his chest and staring up at him. But I can't wear them either, she said gently. It wouldn't be right, not when. Then don't wear the set. His tone was careless as his hands left her hair and gently pushed the box back at her. "Pass it on to your daughter. Give the set away to a museum. You're always going on about historic pieces being available to the masses. Whatever you decide, it's yours now." Now Hermione was backing away slowly, looking down at the box in her hands. "Merlin, Draco, I still don't understand. Why did you give this to me?" "Something had to be done about your hair," he said. "On such a rare priceless—" "Will you stop going on about it? I gave it to you because I wanted to, all right?" Malfoy was glaring now. "When Slughorn mentioned your birthday, and you were sitting there in potions with your hair practically brushing the ceiling, and blood messages dripping all over the castle, the Gloriana set was the first thing I thought of. I knew its history, but I know its protections too." Hermione stared at him, unbelieving. "I didn't care about its significance." Malfoy's voice was raised, fists clenched. "I just wanted you to have it." He turned away, striding across the room to throw himself back on the sofa. Then he cleaned red ink off the blotted essay and resumed marking, legs stretched out on the cushions, ignoring her once more. The hourglass, which had stopped entirely, once again poured down its sand. Hermione just stood there by the pillow, clutching the box to her pounding heart. How could he do such a thing? How could any Malfoy do such a thing? What of sanctimonia vincit semper? Pure, flawless diamonds passed for centuries down a pure, flawless line, only to end up in the crowded pocket of a muggle-born daughter of dentists? Hermione was suddenly humbled by the gift, no matter how reckless it may have been. She tucked the box back into her beaded bag and walked over to stand before him. Malfoy looked up at her warily, quill in hand. "All right then, Lord Malfoy," she said. "Thank you. I'm honored to accept it." She bent down and kissed him lightly on the cheek, then quietly left the office. Hermione skipped dinner that night and went to bed early with her textbook, but she didn't study. She just lay in bed fingering the letters carved by Bellatrix into her arm. The cold, implacable tone of Lucius' letter still made her tremble. It basically ordered Draco to hurt her, or worse if necessary, to get the diamonds back. What must it have been like to have such a man as a father? It was a wonder his son was sane at all. She found she couldn't even attempt to sleep without getting the Gloriana set out of her trunk and putting it under her pillow, warding her window and bed with every spell she remembered from the Horcrux hunt. Anyone entering the bedroom wouldn't be able to even see the bed. By any means necessary. She shivered. The room was very dark now. Ginny had come in and gone to sleep immediately. She was exhausted, Hermione knew, worn out from her studies and Quidditch captain duty. Her relations with Blaise were strained again. Something had happened, but Ginny wouldn't tell her what. Hermione hadn't pressed it. It wasn't like Ginny knew every in and out of her and Malfoy's relations. Hermione lay on her back, listening to her breathing. For how long she didn't know. But the moon had risen, and she pulled open her bed hangings a bit to let in the light. Moonlight glittered on the hairpin in her hand. When had she taken it out of its box? She settled under her covers again and lifted up the pin, admiring the diamonds. She hoped she was just lonely and the damn thing wasn't casting a spell on her. Closing her eyes, she lay on her side, the pin clutched against her chest. At least she and Malfoy might be speaking again. A little bit. That husky tone. "You are enough for any wizard." That phrase had joined. "I'll kiss you if you tell me." And "It must be on your person," echoing in her mind, slipping in when she was tired or tipsy, when her defenses were down. "You are enough for any wizard." His mouth quirked slightly. "Too much for most, I'd say." She licks her lips. "Too much for you." His hand slid under her calves to the back of her neck. "Never." He whispers into her mouth, his other hand sliding up her thigh. "I want all of it. I want everything." Hermione sat up and opened her palm. Her hand had clutched the pin so tightly that the jewels had dug into her skin. She was panting and her other hand was inside her knickers. She had to stop this. Malfoy was dangerous for all kinds of reasons. She shook her head almost violently, then pulled out her hand. It was slick with need. This has to stop. She dropped the pin and grabbed her wand, targeting her hand before replacing the pin carefully in its box and tucking it under her pillow. Then she led her thoughts to Theo, that broad body and slow smile. She closed her eyes, but her speculative fantasies kept drifting from soft, hairy skin to supple, muscled smoothness. Finally, in desperation, she dropped them both and fell asleep to dreams of an angst-ridden American actor with dark hair and eyes. He didn't play the hero of the story, though. He was the villain. A villain searching for redemption. Hermione went down early for breakfast and was leaning against the wall outside Ancient Ruins the next morning, working on her pawn, when Malfoy stepped up with a scroll in his hand. "Another one?" Hermione asked, raising her eyebrows. "Next we'll have your mother send a howler." "This was my reply," he said, holding it out. He looked fully in command except for a little tightness around the eyes. "I thought you'd like to see a copy." She flattened out the scroll and read, "Dear Sir, I regret to say that I'm unable to accede to your request. The object in question is in the possession of an individual more than worthy of receiving it, and I will not accept its return. 2 more objects remain in my personal possession to use as I see fit. As for disgracing my name, I clearly remember a day at Flourish and Blotts in my 2nd year when Arthur Weasley said to you, 'We have very different ideas of what disgraces the name of a wizard.' His words proved prophetic, I think, and undoubtedly there will be many times in the future where you and I disagree on how to best honor the Malfoy legacy. Sincerely, Lord Draco Malfoy." Again Hermione pretended to read more slowly, allowing her to marshal her emotions. She rolled up the scroll by hand, blinking back a thin film of tears. "Well, aren't you a big deal?" she said, smiling up at him. "Don't start blubbering," he said, his mouth curving upward as well. "It's just a letter." "I remember that day," Hermione said, recalling her parents' wariness of the strange, sneering wizard, shrouded in dark power, cane in hand, pale hair streaming around the shoulders of his rich cloak. "I was outraged on my father's behalf, of course, at the time," Malfoy said, "but I remembered Weasley's words." She held out the scroll to him, and he took it, his warm fingers brushing over hers, like their first time standing together outside Ancient Ruins. Malfoy leaned forward slightly. "I mean it, Hermione. You are more than worthy," he whispered. "There's nothing too good." Hermione stared up at him, uncertain what to say, but just then McGonagall came sailing down the corridor with the rest of the class. Malfoy stepped back, and the students eyed them nervously. "Are they going to fight again?" she heard someone whisper loudly. Half the class backed off. "Not today," Malfoy said, stepping aside to let Hermione enter the classroom first. She smiled at him again and walked through the door, ignoring the goggling students. Sitting at her desk, she fuzzily arranged her parchment, quills, and inkpots, all the while trying to put a name to the swelling, soaring feeling in her chest. As the rest of the class settled and McGonagall began the day's lessons, at this rate they'd never reach the Elder Fool box, he finally identified the emotion. He'd felt it for Harry, for Ron, for Ginny, and certainly for Neville. And now for Malfoy and herself. It was pride. To be continued. Next up, Hermione chats with Lavender in the worst possible place. Thank you for listening to this chapter of the Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, AO3, or Spotify.